Calaroga Shark Media.
Hello, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. I just want to tease something I've got for next Saturday. I recorded with Gianmarco Soresi, and along the way, he slipped into a Mulaney impression. I just want to share it with you. I'm really into this.
Mulaney's is just in a certain kind of range and register that I think just feels right. When I'm joking with my friends, if I'm trying to have riff off with them, it's just the place that I go. It's a little bit presentational. It's really clear. It helps you make a clear setup, and you differentiate the setup from the punchline because you change the octave.
So that'll be on Saturday. Gianmarco Soresi is my guest. Today, my kind of story from the Daily Mail. Despite soaring straight into the Netflix top 10 list, fans were not amused by Adam Sandler's newest special. That's right. One user said on Twitter, "Let me start out by saying I've been a big fan of The Sandman for decades. With that being said, this special was effing awful. The audio was absolute dog poo. Adam mumbling, everyone else just so loud, including the crowd. The sound engineer needs to be fired. All the scripted pieces that are supposed to be candid are tacky and take away from the special." Another user said, "I only watched about 10 minutes. It was too hard to understand what he was saying. The format was just bad or something." Another said, "I'm a huge fan of him too and thought the way he was doing it was clever, but I ended up stopping at about 15 minutes for that reason. It was too hard to understand. I'm glad it wasn't just me." I have not had a chance to watch it yet. It's been a crazy week in my life. Doug Stanhope, it looked like he had a crazy week, but there was a twist. Fans of Doug Stanhope were worried that he'd been arrested on a live stream, but false alarm. The Cochise County Sheriff's Office tells DMZ that Doug Stanhope's Arizona home was used for a training mission by the county SWAT team, and Doug Stanhope gave them the full go-ahead to do it. The spokesperson clarified when the training kicked off, nobody was home, and then Doug showed up during the final training scenario, asked to join as a role player, and got the green light. It was all voluntary. Doug was not arrested, not involved in any illegal activity. The scene did look super real, it is being described. It shows Doug Stanhope appearing to be apprehended by multiple armed men entering his home, with one figure clearly identified as him by viewers. There was also another guy in the house involved in the role play, and knowing Doug Stanhope just a smidge, he probably thinks this is the greatest thing that ever happened. The 800-pound gorilla celebrates Matt Rife on having the #1 most watched special on its channel. OnlyFans has 30 million views on YouTube, 100 million total plays across all platforms. One of the founders of the gorilla said, "We wanted to recognize this important moment, not just for Matt, but also for fans that watch the special." Meanwhile, the Daily Trojan with a hot take. They say, "The comedy world is rife with problems, get it? Women comedy fans are often treated as less important. That needs to change," the Daily Trojan writes. "In stand-up comedy, crowd work is an important skill to have, especially when starting out open mic nights. Matt Rife went viral for his crowd work on TikTok, especially among women. Some found him attractive or charming or funny, or maybe the mix of the three. Regardless of how the Matt Rife fan pipeline operates, it really works. Yet, it seems like Rife is not satisfied with his success. Before the premiere of his Netflix special Natural Selection in 23, he told Variety, "There's one thing I wanted to tackle in this special, showing people that despite what you think about me online, I don't pander my career to women. I would argue this special is way more for guys." The Daily Trojan writes, "A look at the rest of his YouTube channel shows he almost exclusively posts crowdwork content with such titles as Spitting Game to a Veteran and Handicap Crowd Work Compilation. The latter's over 30 minutes long and has 2.8 million views. Matt's doing completely fine with popularity. There's no reason to rebuke the women who support you aside from misogyny. There's nothing wrong with wanting to expand your audience, but it doesn't have to come at the expense of your current audience. Celebrities don't owe anything to their fans, but there's a concerning pattern of disregard toward women. Women are able to appreciate comedy, music, and art just as well as any other person. Success with women comedy fans should be understood as regular success, not something less than." America Magazine with a Matt Rife hot take. Comedian Matt Rife's crowd work depends on marginalized people in the audience. In Walking Red Flag, Jake Martin writes, "Contrary to first impressions, Matt Rife is not Dane Cook. If you understand this reference, congratulations, you are old." Dane Cook was, at the beginning of this millennium, like Rife is today, a good-looking 20-something white guy stand-up comedian whose bread and butter was raunchy and misogynistic humor. Cook was, at one point, able to parlay his enormous stand-up success, which included selling out Madison Square Garden, into an ever-so-brief film career. Rife is almost that, but when I say he's not the second coming of Cook, that's in part because Rife's level of success has yet to reach the levels that Cook achieved at his peak. For you younger fans, I was doing this during Dane Mania. Dane was really popular there for 4 years, 5 years, something like that. The other comedians hated him. Part of it was just jealousy that he's a MySpace comedian. Met Dane once. He was cool. Back to America Magazine. Where Rife has surpassed Cook is in focusing his stand-up less on the scripted, structured monologue that has been part and parcel of the medium since at least vaudeville. Instead, Rife is focused on interactive crowd work. His best moments are in his extemporaneous back and forths with audience members, particularly those from traditionally marginalized groups such as people with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ community, and the elderly. In one set, when an elderly man tells him that he's been in a wheelchair for 13 years, Rife responds, "It's nice just to relax, isn't it?" Then turns to the audience and says, "Optimism." Rife gestures back to the man and says, "Optimism." Now, I read that as flat as possible, and I thought those were two good jokes. Maybe I'm a jerk. When Rife interacts with a young woman with cerebral palsy who tells him from the crowd that he's hot, he responds, "You watch your hands now. Just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean it won't beat your brakes off." That's a bit hacky. Rife's going out of his way to interact with the marginalized in his show speaks to two correlative aspects of humor, both of which open up a space for the construction and the deepening of authentic relationships. One of those aspects is the knocking over of sacred cows, which in turn leads to another aspect, the deflation of tension. The 1-2 comedic procedure proves liberating for the audience and allows for authentic engagement. In Rife's case, that authentic engagement is usually full of scatological and sexual humor, but that's beside the point. In his foreshadowing of the marginalized, he has given them a public space to fully manifest their humanity. They're not being celebrated. They're not being degraded. They're being allowed to be who they are. Chelsea Handler has a new residency. That's a great gig if you can get one. She's got one at the Cosmopolitan Las Vegas's 3,200-seat Chelsea Theater. It's called Chelsea at the Chelsea. Well done, agent who put that together. It's a monthly or so gig. Tonight, November 2nd and 30th, January 18th, March 21st, April 18th. How'd she come up with the schedule? She joked, "I think they were just trying to link it to my menstrual cycle." That's Vegas for you. Some spoilers for her material, and I know you were going tonight, so you might want to hit pause here. She says there's a story about me playing pickleball on 3 edibles at the Bush compound in Kennebunkport, Maine. There's a story about my failed romance with former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo before he was canceled, and there's a story about Bill Cosby. It's a shame she didn't mention one of her ex-boyfriends. You know who I mean there, Scott Beckett, because then I could go into a bit, but I'm not going to do it. For those of you who don't know, she used to date Joe Coy, one-time host of the Golden Globes. So Handler says of Cosby, "This was many years ago in his hotel room, but I had 2 men with me, so my experience didn't end the way it could have. There's not many people with such crazy stories, but I feel if you're sincere, you can't go wrong. The people who are my fans rely on me for the truth." Does she party? I'm more of a homebody. Okay, well, I'm in Vegas. Sure, I'll be out with my friends gambling, partying, you know, but unless I'm doing that or on stage, it's low key for me. I'm in bed by 10, my kind of person. On the weekends now, sometimes I'll stay up to 11:15. Crazy, right? I am up early, though. Chelsea said, "I just got a new dog, and we went wine tasting up in Napa. He's a chow chow named Doug, and I've had chows before, and they're not very social. They don't play fetch, but he has all those traits in one dog, and it's impossible not to notice his good looks. I don't want to objectify him, but he's so handsome." Chelsea's favorite musicians. I listen to a Spotify called Golden Hour. It's a mixture of cool, soul, funky jazz, and, happy hour songs, but I also listen to Nathaniel Rateliff, who I just saw her perform, and I enjoy Chappell Roan songs and Sabrina Carpenter, and Taylor Swift, of course. Chelsea used to date somebody who made a Taylor Swift joke one time. I mean, you're practically begging me to play it. Scott Beckett's driving around, listening to the podcast. He's throwing stuff at his dashboard. Like, I'm not going to do the bit, Scott. Relax. What up-and-coming comedians is Chelsea Handler excited about? Sorry, are Chelsea Handler most excited about? That's how English works. Her current favorites are Yamanika Saunders and Rosebud Baker. How about politics? She said, "I heard a great quote recently. Decades can go by without any progress happening, and then within weeks it could feel like decades of progress. It feels like there's good momentum, good energy, but I won't touch politics in my shows. My show's for people to enjoy themselves. They're coming to see my stand-up act to take a load off." If you enjoy what I do here, one of the ways you can support the show is you can go to buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. There's some money in the tip jar. I will take your money. I'll go to the national donuts chain where pumpkin is back. I put on the app the other day and they were like, "Pumpkin donut?" And I was like, "Yeah, pumpkin donut. You got me." So I'll be fattening up until, when did they get rid of the pumpkin? Like November 6th or so? Like, I get how Halloween works, but then like there's some pumpkin spice hanging around. They keep using it. By the way, you know what's really tasty and TMI here? The butter pecan. But if you suffer from kidney stones, like one podcast host in his basement, butter pecan will create kidney stones. Don't do it. I get that it's delicious. Stick with the caramel, maybe the pumpkin. Anyway, buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. I'm going to give you a random, non-comedic podcast recommendation. Question of Faith is hosted by my buddy Deacon Mike. So yes, it's a spiritual podcast, but that's not why I'm listening. Apparently, Deacon Mike put together this softball league, and he's been updating us on the Catholic softball league out in Cleveland, and I'm fascinated by this. Question of faith, wherever you get your podcast. At least I hope wherever you get your podcast. Hopefully Mike has submitted it everywhere. It's definitely on Apple Podcasts. Greg Fitzsimmons says, I still walk on stage with a crumpled up piece of paper with bullet points on it. I have notes when I'm trying new stuff, and I still get excited about it. Sometimes I'll be out to dinner with some friends. It's 10 p.m. We've been sitting there for hours, eating, talking, and laughing. Did you hear me drop the G? The Queens came out. And I'll be like, all right, I got to head into town. They're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, I got a show. And they say, how much are you making? And I say, $30. Pat McGann is getting ready to open up for Sebastian Maniscalco. Sebastian's doing 4 nights at Madison Square Garden in New York City. That's insane. Pat says, I grew up with funny people. We walked to school together and tried to bust each other up. Combine that with just like in comedy, my parents, I remember them talking about Seinfeld, even when it's just a regular on Carson. Was Jerry a regular on Carson? He was definitely a regular on Letterman. Was he a regular on Carson? Mike from the Letterman pod, hit me up on the side. Tell me the answer to that one. I'd sneak away to watch Eddie Murphy Delirious. When you're 10, 12 years old, you understand some of the material, but you're also seeing this guy on SNL. He's also a fan of Pearl Jam. And he says their latest record, Dark Matter, is a favorite. I've been listening to it front to back. I just let it play. And that is your comedy news for today. And before we go, a very happy birthday to my dog. She is 17 today. Happy birthday, doggy. If you enjoy the program, tell a friend about it. They might like it too. And I'll see you here tomorrow.